sustainable water management strategies, innovative water-saving technologies and practices, and case studies of successful water conservation projects. We'd also like to thank our participants who are joining us and our sponsor. We'll get a word from Chris Knight, who's our Sapal Steel representative. Chris?
Good afternoon, ladies and gents. Thanks for having us once again. It's been great to actually sponsor these events because it is so close to home. But in terms of our material and the topic of course today is that our profile, well, not profiles, our material is very good in terms of rainwater harvesting. The rainwater that can come off there and the capabilities of storing that will assist going forward in terms of design. I know one aspect is your PV panels in terms of your power, but another aspect is definitely your rainwater harvesting, which is very, very efficient off metal roofs. Especially with your paint colors, it also assists and also incorporating the correct slopes and profiles to save that water. But thank you and good luck to everybody. And thank you again, KZN. Thanks.
Building is more than assembling a structure. More. Building is more than assembling a structure, more than putting the pieces together. It's about building relationships, building trust, building pride. It's about having a vision and seeing it come to life as a testament to human strength and creativity. That's why we do what we do, driven by passion and powered by state-of-the-art technology. Sapal Steel is an African thought leader in world-class building solutions that offer long-term sustainability. We are the only producer of aluminium zinc-coated products in South Africa, and each product in our range is made with pride and care. Our pre-painted color-coated steel sheets are lightweight, fire-resistant, weatherproof, eco-friendly, and energy-reflective. They are easy to install and highly durable, not to mention beautiful to look at. We also manufacture pre-painted coils, international quality, produced locally. At Sapal Steel, quality assurance is a key priority. We demand extensive quality checks during manufacture, which is why we have confidence in our product warranty. Beyond our product offering, our services also include training, technical support during the building process, and expert knowledge resources. That's because we love being part of the training every step of the way. Sapal Steel, building Africa together and building it with pride.
So if you have been following the news lately, you'll notice that the world is facing unprecedented flooding. Flooding is almost the new fire, you could say. Right? It's not just South Africa, but everywhere that the current infrastructure cannot accommodate these catastrophic events. So our panelists will highlight these issues and possible solutions. Our lead panelist for today is Ken Lever, and I'll introduce him. It's got quite a lengthy bio. So Ken Lever was born in 1946. He was fortunate to have designed, detailed, and supervised medical, hospital buildings, housing, large and small, for the affluent and the poor. University buildings for maths and stats, medicine, education, and the sciences. Vocational training complexes, museums, galleries, broadcast studios, Nat archives, Nat parks, headquarters, churches, and heritage restoration, amongst others. This was done mostly in Rhodesia, which is old Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Malawi, Scotland, as well as some early on and again later in South Africa. He's assisted mainly pro bono projects with church buildings, large and small, those well built and falling apart in Rhodesia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Malawi, and KZN for the Anglican Church. Ken has most recently assisted other practices in South Africa with airport buildings, hospitals, and a complex manufacturing control building, and is still trying to be active and useful and settled in our refurb retrofit in Ballito. He is married to Frances Rose for 56 years and has 3 kids and 5 grandchildren. Quite a lengthy bio, Ken. Thank you. I'll hand it over to you.
Your Lordship, thank you. So, now, I'm going to sit, if you don't mind. I think it's less intimidating for me and for you if I sit down and stand. Okay, right. Well, thank you very much. And thank you for the introduction. I've been fortunate to have spent a significant amount of time in Zimbabwe. But just so that you know, the entire Zimbabwe architectural body consisted, I think, at its peak, of 87 architects in the entire country. So one gets plenty of opportunity, okay, in a smaller country, and even fewer registered architects, obviously, in Mozambique and Malawi. Anyway, thank you for that. One thing that I didn't mention there, and I've just remembered, and I tried to find photographs of it, I did, in fact, at our place on the outskirts, the northern outskirts of Harare, we did, in fact, build 2 domed systems using Hassan Fatty's elliptical arch construction against a gable wall, which stored at that stage a paltry 20,000 litres. Anyway, we've done rather better down here. So without further ado, I'm going to go through my notes. Anyway, thanks everybody for coming, and thanks for being online. The title is a little limiting, and I would have preferred water, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And there are plenty of good things, obviously, but there are also a number of ugly things about water, too much of it. And I'm sure that Sekili will fill us in on a number of those issues as well. We all, of course, need clean, potable water for basic survival. We also need to be aware of its potential dangers and damage. Now, the one thing that concerns me, and I think probably concerns just about everybody else here and online, is the fact that we use potable, clean, carefully filtered water in the most ridiculous ways. We flush it down our toilets. How stupid can we be? Unbelievable that we do that. We use it for washing cars, cleaning paving. Studies in the UK and North America, particularly Canada, reckon that under 30% of clean water that's delivered under normal previous circumstances is actually used for drinking and cooking. That means over 60% is in fact used for needs that do not need to have clean, pure water. And that's one little factor that I think we should be aware of. And it's certainly the case in our country. Look, it does mean all sorts of things for architects. It can mean dual pipe supply systems. It can mean recycling the water, all sorts of things like that come to mind. But the fact is that we get delivered clean, pure water, and then we do the most stupid things with it. So moving on. And that's not just from heavy rains, but from badly maintained municipal supply lines, the Mshloti floods, for instance. There's a cause and effect problem. Also, architects can be an enemy in this regard. We pave over huge areas. We create huge runoff. Really have to think a little bit more carefully about what we do with the rain that falls on our roofs and on our, particularly on our paved areas. We have to be able to replenish our aquifers, our aquifers. And we just don't seem to do it. And that's one of the problems, I believe, that we have in Durban and in a number of cities around South Africa. There's just far too many roofs and far too much paved area for the rain to soak into the ground. Anyway, that's something that needs to be considered and thought about. As architects, we need to be fully aware of the need to conserve and utilize sensibly clean, filtered, and potable water. Potable, of course, is the operative word with the water we get supplied. And everybody gets very excited when there's a hint of E. coli in the water. When and where supplied, but we must also be aware of how to capture, store, clean, and recycle wherever possible. Now, the obvious things, Kiara, leave that one on the screen a bit, is that we should be, I think that maybe can we have the next slide? And we should all be fully aware of these. I mean, these should be second nature. We shouldn't be having to discuss in detail many of these, but just as a reminder, everybody, all architects, we have at our hands, at our fingertips, not just from our own personal experience, but obviously also from information on the internet and from the suppliers, manufacturers. There's such things as low flow plumbing. Please make sure that you are aware of it and that your clients are aware of it. That includes taps, shower heads, flush valves, installation of pipework, potential leaks, again, hands-on inspection on site is important. Backup storage and pressure control. That's just storage of municipal water I'm talking about. There needs to be something in reserve. Even if you don't collect the rainwater and recycle it, you really need to have backup. There seems to be very little of that in my experience, certainly in the northern part of the Durban area. Education and monitoring of use. By that I mean, really have a responsibility to advise our clients and users of how to use water and how not to waste it. So education is part of our gambit, our responsibility, monitoring of use. Recycling, okay, now we're getting on to something that we should be aware of, we should know what to do, if we can recycle water that we have used already for WCs, bidets, cars, gardens, and so on. And then there's the whole question of what we do with the water we've used, grey water. Grey water, by definition, is water that's not affected by sewage. Okay, so that excludes immediately, obviously, the loo, the toilet. It probably excludes the sink and possibly excludes the bidet. But basins, baths, showers, we should be able to collect, clean as necessary, get the soap out of it, get any small solid matter out, and reuse the stuff in WCs, bidets, cars, gardens, and so on. I've got a couple of things. Obviously, the other thing that we should also be aware of, and it's something mentioned by, I think Chris mentioned it briefly, is rainwater harvesting. That is something that's very close to my heart, and it's something that we should be aware of. I will come on to some examples of my own that I have done, built in Belito, using Color Plus, fairly large area, 270 square meters of roofing, and what that can save you, what you can collect if you obviously plan ahead and do the right kind of things. Young architects, listen, okay. So rainwater harvesting obviously comes with that, but I'm going to be talking a bit more detail about that. And then, of course, there's the other question of landscaping, gardening, and so on. We should be able to collect, store rainwater for our gardens, particularly our veggie gardens, in bad times. Right, moving on. Thank you, Kiara. Right, this is just a chart. We'll leave on for a few minutes. You can absorb it. We, and when I say we, I actually mean Frances, because I'm usually sort of comatose when she reads it. Frances reads the rain gauge every morning at 6 o'clock. So that is our own record of rain at number 5 Stella Road, Belito, for the last, I think it's 11 or 12 years. And the interesting thing is that in the difficult years, the drought years, we arrived and moved in 2013 fully. We were in effect in a little flat before that. Altered place in 2013. That was like a bad year. And 2014 was the bad year. And it was way down, pretty much less than half of what we've been having in the last 5 years. But the previous 5 years, I think it's from 2013 to 2017, we had an average over that time of 975 millimeters of rain. Now, you may or may not think that's a lot of it, but you can collect a huge amount of it. And I'll come on to the calculation that I use and that I think everybody else should be using, which is at the bottom of the page. And in the more recent times, in the good times, the La Nina times, we have in fact had an average of, what is it, 1,100 something or other?
Morrison is close by. Morrison is
I think difficulty really. You've got, I don't know what's happened there, Kiara. Can you get rid of that? Thank you. Rainwater collection, potential, roof plan area in square meters, times annual rainfall in millimeters, obviously, less, I take off 15%, wastage, evaporation and the like, gives you a figure in litres of usable water collectible and storage. Can you move to the next one, please? Here, next slide. Okay, that's the calculation there that I use, and it seems to work. Now, that, in terms of my place, I'll move on to in a second. Like I've just said, we've had 7 good years. Go through that. My own direct experience is we have a roof collection area of 271 square meters, as it happens. I've used a 5-year average of 1,135 millimeters of rain per year. That's 15%. That means that at our place, we're able to collect and store 261,585 liters of water. That is 261 cubic meters of water, people, that otherwise will be just flushed down the drain and go into the sea or the river or whatever it's going to. Okay, so that's something please to keep in mind. However, the 5 previous years were somewhat lower. We had an average of 975 between 2013 and 17. 2014 was, of course, the bad drought year with 589 millimeters of rain that year. However, that did mean that in that year, in those 5 years, averaging it out, 271 times 975 give us a collectible amount of 230,762 liters of water, or 230 cubic meters of water that can be collected and stored and reused. Now, I hope it's a bit of an eye-opener, particularly for some of our younger architects. You can do it. We have built, next one, I think we're just going to flash to the next one. Okay, well, that's just the roof area outlined in blue. The building on the right, the linked building on the right is in fact a recent construction. It's the studio, bedroom and guest suite. On the left is the original building that was adapted. It was an original house built built for families in the very early 60s. Fairly small footprint, but it had a dreadful asbestos covered roof that was falling apart, and the timber was in not very good nick, no fascias, no gutters. But we then were able to reuse the trusses, the roof trusses, which we extended, and we created this big collector on the left, running into the 1.2 meter wide box gutter, which then drops into my underground chambers. Can you next one, please? Next slide. That's just the next floor down. Okay, next one down. Next. Oh, you jumped one, but anyway, okay, we're down at the bottom now. Right, so what we did with our extension is that at the bottom of the extension, because we're on a slope, something like a 1 in 11 slope, we've dug in and built under the studio and under the living area, which is above it, living room, bedroom. We built 7 chambers out of concrete and brick and lined them, and they collect 104,000 litres of rainwater, which we can reuse. That's 104 cubic metres of water underneath the building. The water is an average, before the outlets, the overflows, it's an average of 1.8 deep. And the access we have from the floor above and from the sides. Next one. Shall I use the mic? Oh, sorry. Is it not clear? That better? Better? Okay, sorry. Okay. Like the tube. Okay, so those are the collection tanks we have under the studio. Move on, next one. Well, that just shows the section and the slope. Okay. So the building on the left is the original building, showing the collector roof, the big box gutter dropping down to. There are tanks in the first extension bit tagged into the lower level and dug underground. We missed the one drawing, I think, the one you jumped, Kiara. You go back one. There we go. There's tanks along the side. Whoops, you've gone too far. Stop. That's it. Okay. So those are the first tanks. Carry on. You can go back to where we were. Next. Okay, stay there. All right, stay. Well, anyway, all right. So tanks, original tanks in 2013 on the left. The more recent ones we built in 2019-20 are under the studio and the living area, which are linked by a deck and bridge to create a courtyard in the middle. Anyway, the water down the bottom is accessible by valve in manholes down the bottom, which we then have to use. We use a small solar powered pump that we pump out onto the garden and cars and so on and so forth. Okay, next one. And that just shows the tanks being built. Each flows into the other to level the water up, and then obviously at the lower level, which is where that hut and that paved area is to the right, we have overflows and outlets into three manholes. And on the right is the famous Colour Plus, acres of it, which obviously collect the water very easily and run into the gutters very easily as well. Right, so let me see what I've got here. Just for interest's sake, if you want to collect water in JoJo tanks, the 5,000 litre tank, you should know. If you don't know, they are 1.8 metre diameter, and the water is about 2 meters. Whoops, a bit rough. 2,000, that gives you 5,000 litres. One problem with the round tanks is the wasted space between the tanks, where round meets round, which is why I decided to go for rectangular tanks. If we'd had the money and the space at the time, considering the amount of water we could have collected, the 230 cubic meters, as opposed to the 104 cubic meters that we do collect, we would have in fact required an extra 66.6 square meters of storage space for 1 meter deep to give us that capacity. That would have bumped us up from 104 to 230 liters of 230 cubic meters of water. Okay, so you have to obviously plan ahead. You've got to think about the space you've got and the money you've got, clearly, combination of both. And it's money that you have to convince your client to actually expend and use, and that it is worth it over a period of time to use as a way of cutting down on the water that you take from the municipal mains. Unfortunately, I've said here, local examples are not very encouraging or inspiring. The local Belita Junction regional mall did proudly tell me on one occasion, soon after it was built, they collect and store 80,000 litres of water. Now, to be quite frank, okay, it could be a function of budget, ability, but definitely not a function of space. But 80,000 litres, when I collected 104,000 litres on my little house, it's a bit pathetic. We need to collect water in commercial and industrial developments, people, and use it, recycle it, pump it. And pumping it is very easy with a small solar-powered pump. Right, so that's one example which rather opened my eyes to the need in this area. So there we go. So I would encourage, obviously, local developers, clients, builders and designers all to obviously consider it. I came down here, I was asked to come down here in 2008, and I worked for 2 years on the King Sharky International Airport complex. And that's a massive complex with a huge roof area. They have the potential of storing after the 15% deduction, of storing 7.5 million litres of water. That's the potential off their roofs. They don't store any, other than a couple of JoJo tanks that were put in as an afterthought. I know it was a fast-track contract, and you can't blame the contractors, the developers, and all the rest of it. It was such a pity that nobody would listen, because we had the wonderful opportunity there because of the excavations and the massive basement area of actually storing water there. We didn't do it. Now we really have to think about next stages. An area of roof of the, I'm simply talking about the main terminal. I'm not talking about the cargo terminal or any of the ancillary buildings. And altogether, of course, we built 62 buildings on that airport site between 2008 and 2010. But the main one, the biggest roof areas, of course, is obviously the terminal building. But there's a thought that roof could collect and store 7.5 million litres of water. Didn't do it. Great pity. We really need to encourage our mindset in architecture and engineering in South Africa and really work hard to convince our clients of the needs and the benefits. Note the problems with water collection, storage, waterproofing, potential leaks, and damage to structures. That's not all just plain sailing. Obviously, you've got to build your storage collection process and your reticulation process. You've got collection, reticulation, storage. Obviously, those are the three things, and you have to take care of all those aspects. So it's your pipework as well, which you must take care of so you don't lose it. And that, of course, is one of the problems we have with some of our very aged service delivery reticulation systems in our bigger cities, is that we have so much wastage, so much gets lost. It's just absolutely terrifying. But as architects, we have some control over that process. I've said here, clean, potable municipal water is not only wasted through poor maintenance of service delivery, but we use it for astounding things like toilets, car washing, pavement washing, and gardens. We need our heads red, I've said. Okay, it is estimated that we use well under 30% of our clean, hygienic, potable water for actually drinking and cooking. The rest is mostly a waste of money and time. And as architects, I believe we can assist in a big way. And of course, we need to ask how water, including safe water, can be used visually and orally. I'm not going to take too much longer because we've got two keen presenters here. So I'm just going to run briefly through. Can we move on to the next slides? Okay, that's the big, on the left-hand photograph, that's my big box cutter over the top of what we've created, a big, I suppose, veranda on the roof. We took the old asbestos roof off. We've reused the trusses to create the rain collector, and we put a slab over the top of the original building, which is used as a deck. And on the right, a certain amount of water is used on the roof garden with the extension part, which is also collecting rainwater in the distance. That thing sticking above is another aspect, and for another lecture, another talk, whatever it is. And that's my wind tower. We built a wind tower to air condition in place. Next slide. Oh, that's just a picture of the front. Okay, showing the wind tower, but not the water. Right, how can water be used to benefit our buildings, our architecture, our clients, and our users? Tarawando, okay, is of Japanese extraction origin, and the Japanese have an outstanding several centuries of using water with their temples and all the rest of it. Sure, they are masters at it. But just an example, Tarawando's Church on the Water. Next one. Tarawando's Water Temple. at Hong Kong. And then, of course, there's the famous one. And of course, one of the great benefits that we tend to forget about water is the sound and the calming effect that the sound can produce. Using water in sort of, I suppose, pond, fountain, waterfall fashion can be of great benefit in our stressful times. Next one. This is an interesting one in Australia. Cape Schanck House. I don't know whether you've heard of it or seen it. Built 2 years ago, which is about 70 kilometers south of Melbourne. And in the middle, if you can see the house, glazed house, is that curious waste, sort of sexy water container in the middle, the yellow thing. That collects the water off the roof into a tank. Any overflow, there's an overflow pipe in the middle, overflow gets taken to an underground tank elsewhere. But that water conditions that space. It absorbs the heat and it actually cools the place down. Okay, we can use water in that way to condition. That is a steel tank. It's made of 6mm steel plate, painted, coated. But there we go. Interesting use of rainwater. Next one. Right now, learning from nature. Biomimicry. I'm sure you all heard of it, particularly the youngsters have heard of biomimicry. And famous books. And, if you haven't, young architects, if you haven't read it, I highly recommend Michael Paulin's book, Biomimicry in Architecture. Some of these slides are taken from that. These ones are not. They're taken off the internet. But this is the famous fog basking beetle, or mist collecting beetle, whatever you want to call it. But it's an astonishing beetle. It's got little ribs on its back, little bumps and drizzies. It, in the early morning, gets on the top of the dune and it harvests the mists coming off the sea simply by condensation on its back. And of course, there are a number of very famous examples that have been taken, architectural examples that have been taken from the example of this amazing beetle. It's got ribs and it has a waxy coating on its surface, which allows the water to collect in globules, bubbles, that then it can harvest and it flows into its mouth. The picture on the left actually has, you can see, is actually the little white rim is the water going into its mouth. Anyway, next. This is a very famous example, you may have heard of it, the Las Palmas Water Theatre. And that's using the same principle. The water is collected on those ribs, runs down the channels into underground tanks and serves the town of Las Palmas in the Canaries. Amazing what you can do, collecting water from the air. And it doesn't matter where you are, there's always moisture in the air. And usually, the warmer the air, the more moisture there is to collect. So don't think you can't collect it in dry areas. Of course you can. Next. All right, there's an example, an Italian example in North Africa. The moisture in the air condenses on the mesh and runs into the tank, which you can see on your right. Okay, this is in a village in the southern part of Ethiopia. Next. Right, and of course, when you collect the water, if you want to reuse it, generally you've got to clean it. But you can clean it with plants. And the plants will, of course, not only planting and the vegetation will not only clean it, it also gives you, obviously, the benefit of the greenery and the oxygen exchange. That's just an example I think this is an example in the south of England. What's it called? Ipswich. Right, next. Okay, last one. Just a reminder of what we have direct control of, architects. We can, in fact, obviously have direct control of any building with low flow plumbing, installation pipe work, making sure that it works properly, backup storage, pressure control, education, monitoring, recycling, grey water reclamation. That's basically it. I have just one little thing I want to read, which is actually from Michael Paulin's book, which is just a reminder of where we should be. And he says at the end of his water management section, water management, Just as with our use of fossil fuels, many of our standard approaches to water have an inherent technological laziness to them that is developed from the same assumptions of limitlessness that characterized our attitude to other resources at the start of the Industrial Revolution, i.e. the never-ending coal resources. Maybe the never-ending water resources should be included in that. Studying adaptations in biology can reveal solutions to some of the most intractable of problems, like harvesting water in dry places and dry times, or a greenhouse that reduces water usage by a factor of 8, and schemes such as the Las Palmas Water Theatre that deliver fresh water with a factor of 10 saving in energy, 10 times cheaper than get water delivered from Spain. That's the way they've been doing it, shipping it across. It must be a vastly expensive way of getting fresh water. But that's what they've been doing until recent times. Rethinking our wastewater treatment methods could help restore fertility of our soils, and replumbing buildings and cities with energy optimized systems could and should deliver further increases in water resource efficiency. Thank you. Right, that's enough for me. Who's going to do it? You want to do first or you? Ken. Sorry? Oh, I did. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Okay, there we go. I beg your pardon. Right. I'm going to stand for this. My head's Ken, your turn. Okay, Chen, I've got a little introduction here. Chen Sanieri. I hope I've got it right. Nearly. Not too bad for an English one. Okay, all right, there we go. Vincenzo. That's right? Yes, that's right. Vincenzo Sanieri, known as Chen, because friends and family gave him the name. His father was Italian and mum English. He was born in Durban and schooled at Durban High School, where he excelled in art, maths, science, and maths, winning the Matric Art Prize. He received an art bursary to study art and sculpture in Italy, but chose the School of Architecture, Howard College, where he started at the age of 17. Anyway, well done. So studied at university at Howard College, at Howard campus. He was an avid top surfer, winning numerous contests growing up in the 70s. Hope he had time to study as well. Maybe a little bit. A little bit there we are. In his 5th year, in 1979, he won the biggest Pan-Am surfing contest in South Africa at the Bay of Plenty in front of 30,000 spectators, and was flown to Hawaii to compete in pro-am events on the North Shore of Hawaii, dropping out of varsity to explore his surfing talent. Very sensible. Very sensible thing I've come across so far. Anyway, there we go. He returned 3 months later and had to do fire service in Durban Fire Department to complete military training and pay back student loans. He became a fire prevention officer and graduated with fire engineering diploma and lectured at Natal University. He then registered for his final year in 1990, quite a bit later, and completed a thesis of an ocean sports centre for the Durban Beachfront for the provincial wave riding and life-saving fraternity. Miraculously, he says, it was the first and only thesis ever built. He started his practice, Danieli Associate Architects, 30 years ago, and grew to 35 staff with 5 interior designers, the second biggest practice in town. Danieli Associate Architects specialized in high and luxury residential, hotel and boutiques, corporate offices, and won national and international awards, along with being on top billing a number of times. Today, Chen operates on his own, giving 100% to signature clients and working alongside in association with 3 super talented young architects on a project-by-project basis. Quote from Chen. Chen says, "My biggest dream was and is to stow all my experience into transforming low economic housing into what they really deserve, but could never get through the doors of the highly protected political environment. Someday, sometime, some way, miraculously, I'll be able to fulfill my dream of serving the poorest of the poor. Nothing is impossible if you believe. Chen says he believes. Well done, Chen. All your way.
I'll probably, typical Italian style, I'll talk stories and things that have happened. I'm been asked to sort of focus on the gorgeous greenhouse a bit, but before I get there, I want to kind of get to aspects of that house. And and as Ken said, I grew up in Durban. Water was a big part of my life. It was the seawater. But funny enough, as a young kid, we used to watch movies, and always said to my mom, I couldn't understand why we never put the plug in the basement and the water went out, and all those guys that I saw in the movies were just, those movies like war movies and deserts and people. So it was in my mind about conservation. My mom was an avid gardener. She won millions of garden awards and loved gardening. So I grew up in that realm. And then going into the surfing world and all that stuff and waves and wave riding, eventually did get to Hawaii and all that sort of stuff. And it was in the 70s, and it was just basically the hippie era, post Woodstock, all that sort of stuff. And the younger guys wouldn't know what you're talking about, but I do. And I was a youngster then, and arriving in Hawaii and going, there were a lot of hippies living there, people living off the land. There were roofs with plastic catching water, guys were showering, there was gardens, and people were just living with nothing. It was all Americans mostly, and a lot of Aussies, just rebelling against the whole, there was the Vietnam and all the, just a whole questioning where society's going in those days. What I grew up in, it's what I saw. But it just amazed me how simple people were living and how sustainable they were living then. It was just sustainable living. I got exposed to it, and I think the older guys would kind of know that. And people just really wanted to, there weren't people doing nothing. They were growing their gardens, and so-and-so was working down the road in the cane fields in Hawaii, and I was just watching all this sort of stuff. We were brought up a lot more conservative, so it was like a bit of a different realm, but there was a definite sort of era in that. So getting onto the gorgeous greenhouse, which I'll get onto, excuse me, I came across, I was introduced to a husband and wife who were passionate about sustainability and all the rest of it. And I've heard this so many times with so many clients, and I've always tried to convince people how you can actually live off the sun, the wind. It pours in Durban, KZN. There's boiling hot sun and there's howling winds, and all those things we don't gather. Maybe detouring back a little bit, also something that was very big in my mind, and I mentioned it earlier to you guys when I was talking. When I got to Hawaii, there's a place called Waimea Bay, and apparently one of the top universities of New York, the young students, they did a thesis, and they went and tapped the power of one wave. And one wave generated enough energy to electrify and look after New York for one day. One wave, one day. Now, that was the 70s. So just those things sort of like shaped you. I thought about it, made me think, geez, there's so much energy, man. Being a surfer, you realize how much power is in the waves. And maybe I'm detouring a little bit about sustainability in water, but there's a hang of a big energy sitting out there that we really haven't got hold of. Maybe it's a Elon Musk story with someone dreaming beyond. So with the gorgeous greenhouse, a wonderful couple that bought a tiny little house in Durban North, Eastbourne Crescent, or near Burley Crescent, where all the bigger houses are, but this one happened to be a tiny little one. It used to belong to an old lady, and she loved indigenous, and she planted trees. The whole place was fully indigenous planted. And Jane Troughton, the wife, who's extraordinarily passionate about it, in fact, she had almost given me a thesis when she met me and told me this is what we're going to do. I thought, my goodness, more, or maybe you should match Derek Wayne, in terms of energy and sustainability. Cut a long story short, they decided to take this little building. It was wasn't really much of a building. I think we had to go through the Martha story, but it never really had much to offer. But they used every single brick, there's nothing, everything that was in that home. We stripped it to a shell, and we had a whole vision of wind blowing from the south over a little low, over water, through a low window going up to whirly birds. The whole house was properly reminded me of the hippie houses in Hawaii, but these guys were professional hippies. So I'll say to the respect. Yeah. They were into sustainability, and they were really successful business people. So I'm just joking when I say that, but truly, they're the dream of what people should do. In fact, we were talking last week, and we just had a little bit of a preview about this topic we're going to talk about, is that we really kind of, as architects, only really have control of those sites we deal with. And quite frankly, at the moment, every single person I deal with, luxury home, office building, whatever it is, I'll get them asked totally to think about how do we stop the energy usage, and the sun story, the water, all those attenuation tanks, heat pumps, recycle it, because it really just gets sucked through and goes back into the water, into the ground. Well, the plants get sorted out, but we're running short, and maybe Sakiru will tell us a little bit more about the realities of it all. But so this couple were really extraordinary about what they did do, and the entire home is off the grid. We did the 216, 215, 216. I think it was on the list of a sustainable thing that Richard Stretton and all the crew went and looked at. Apparently, it was the last thing they looked at. And they were I wasn't there, but they were so excited about what they saw. They went off and bought a couple of dozen beers and just sat there and just listened, because, it was just I think any architect, I believe, would have done as good a job, because, you had people that were wanting to go beyond and beyond. And they were just simply going to do it. And they never had a big budget, but they had done research. Our water tank was almost like a plastic space frame grid that formed like a swimming pool. They lined it with a kind of a bitumen thing. The water went down there, it was covered up and sorted out, and they'd soak it out. They tested the water. The husband, Greg, he's involved in chemicals or chemicals, but he's got mates in that territory. Cut a long story short, he tested the water. It made our water like bad. Well, absolutely. You told me about your filter earlier, so that tells you the truth. Anyway, cut a long story short, the water was as pure as ever. The electricity, which is not what we're really going to talk about today, is we're not going to focus on, but they generated so much electricity their batteries were too full. They didn't know what to do with it. The city didn't know how to buy it back. They were talking about it, but it was 216. They could have lit all the roads in Durban North with the blackouts. They had these banks of batteries. We had the guy the museum do SAIA in Paris. It's got that green wall. It's an anthropology building that you walk through, and on the side of the Seine. Well, the guy who worked on that, or knew the guy who built it, did a green wall for us. And it was a growing wall, and different parts of the year, different flowers would bloom and do all the rest of it. So much so that I'm jumping around big time, but we did a 3-story office building next to the Tonga unit building on Shangrocks Drive. And the client said to me, I know that greenhouse you did, that thing, I want that wall. I want it 3 stories up my office building. And it's there today next to Tonga unit. But this green wall, there's someone's red flowers growing up it, and the whole story. But it was really all reusing rainwater and basically taking bits and pieces of what people have done all around the world. Their swimming pool was a really interesting one, and this was, I've got to give Jane full credit there. I learned a hang of a lot from her. We put the design and had fun creating spaces, cost insulation. All the timber was reused and cupboards. It was like a real take everything you got and add some new stuff, but we used everything all over it. The bricks of the house we used for paving. She got chickens there. Planting, she got enough vegetables to supply her road, eggs. It's clean and organized. They got their bedroom doors are open. We're going to show a video on these. That might tell you a few more things, but birds fly through. they really are passionate about what they do. Maybe this video would be good to watch now, just to give a bit more of a bit of a brushstroke of what kind of went on there. That's Jane. Anyway, Jane Charlton and her husband Greg Courtney really one of
Sorry, there is no sound.
There is no sound on this video.
so where you see her, she's on her, especially on her roof. I mean, it's properly, there's plants there, there's vegetables there, there's beehives. It really is, when I say honestly, they were like, I was taken back in time from the 70s to a professional couple that were like the hippies I've met on all the islands where I was surfing. It just blew my mind that, yeah, we had these people that were really willing to go the whole hog. That water you saw there, some of it was the pool water. What they had these reed beds with stone in it, and they were different levels, like the Falling Waters House. The water flows through those reed beds and gets into the swimming pool. You can take the water out of the swimming pool. It's properly hope that cars there. It's properly filtered. The materials, everything else in the whole building was all about recycled, reused, They were really having a whole lot of fun, and believe me, it was a tiny bug. It wasn't like I've had a front row house in Zimbabwe where they've got water purifying systems, and they've gone the whole, they're off the grid, but they really spent a ton of money in a much different way because that's kind of where they wanted. These people were in a different situation. They were taking this beautiful site that had all this indigenous planting and really making it come alive. I think maybe that's enough about that. I think a lot of people have read it, seen a lot about it, but maybe show some of the slides. There's a roof that she was on the right there. Those screens help the northeaster blow through. An old house opens up and it just wind blows through. Nothing ingenious. All the sort of stuff that Derek Wang and all the various guys told us at Varsity and kind of stuff I saw in the tropical islands. A lot of the tropical islands don't have windows. They just have shutters on the veranda. So the wind blows through and it really cools the place. So it's like a radiator, the wind blows through and cools it. So yeah, there's the water going through the reed beds and sandstone beds into the pool. The other tank's on the other side, the underground one. Maybe carry on. There's sort of the roof, the panels. There's the green wall. If you look at the lower slide there where the lights are, that's sort of the pond where the wind blows from the southwesterlies we get from our rain wind. There's low windows and the wind blows up and there's a swirly birds that draw the air through. So simple thing, but they had an old staff quarters there that they just greened the whole building and created this green wall. And this guy is so talented. I mean, different flowers bloom at different times of the year, which motivated this other client who's heard about it to do a 3-story office building entrance with this and I don't know. I think a lot of the guys are doing these little clip-on plastic box things. This is a proper wall growing. It's just really is fun really. Maybe. Yeah, there's the low windows there, and the wind blows over the glass and goes up there. There's the green wall on the left there, at the top left. You can see that some red flowers are blooming on that green wall at the moment. All the materials, all the recycled stuff, and it was just really, there was no corners cut, but it's amazing what you can do if you just simply think about something, but you have a support of a client who says, this is where I want to go, take me there, and you can take them there. And it's been so much fun doing it. And as I said in the beginning, we really only have control of our sites. You guys deal with the bigger macro picture. But I've also been in parallel with all this stuff, being quite interested in what's going on in Saudi. And just listening to this neon projects with I'm changing the subject a bit. They don't have they're a deserty country. But they're taking water out of they doing osmosis out of the salt water and recycling that, and they're feeding the country and doing and there's it's going to be off the grid in every aspect of the thing. They've got the money, but they're deciding we're spending $3 trillion on 5 different zones, and it's so big. I've been looking at different pics, and you can look it up at Google. There's movies, really quite incredible. And all the best of the best architects of the world have been hired for different buildings and different things and all the rest of it. But what's interesting is in Cape Town, because of the water situation, it's not so great down there. The Radisson on the waterfront, it's got a reverse osmosis there. The whole building, since the day they built it, they've got a underground, it's under the building. It's beautifully, detailed, and the whole building runs off the seawater. So they didn't want to have guests paying 5-star rates and they haven't got enough water. Water gets cut off for a month or something goes off and those are things that are happening. So we know it's real. So for me, you've got to say, well, that's going to be a reality. Let's design around that reality. And I'm quite blown away how they've done. And when I heard about it, geez. But obviously the Saudi guys. We've got 8 big osmosis plants that are going to supply on from the coast up into the whole all over Saudi to solve their water problems. That's the problem they face, and they're dealing with it that way.
Just one little thing there, Chan. Just following on what you said. It's predicted for our country that with the effects of El Nino, Nino, sorry. Our rainfall is going to drop by up to 33%. So instead of having 975 mils, we're going to have 620 mils. It just reinforces what you said.
And adding to what you say, and you'll probably be able to verify. I'll be looking at Google, just looking at all the different things about water in our place. 2025, apparently that's also a point where the supply cannot deal with the demand. And if you add that drop in rainfall, then we really, and I think you will highlight a whole lot more about that, but it made me think, geez, that's 2 years from now. But what control we do have is over our own little spots and our own little homes, our own little buildings. It's amazing what you can do with JoJo tanks, plumbing it and just sorting it all out. I think maybe I don't want to take any more time. I mean,
well, that's very good. Well done.
I think that's it.
Right. Okay. Oops. Sorry. Mobile. Jeff, thank you very much. Well done. Thank you. Right, it's my pleasure to introduce Sakili Palukani. Am I all right? Palukani. Okay, good. I come from Zimbabwe, so you have to forgive me. Sakili is the water resource scientist who has vast knowledge of water resource management. Sakili is, in fact, with Umgeni Water and obviously advises them. Especially water resource monitoring. He's passionate in water resource monitoring equipment, installation and maintenance to ensure water resource management is achieved with ease. In the early stages of his career, he trained all operations of staff on water resource monitoring equipment use, maintaining and reading. He developed the water resource equipment manual that is used as a reference manual by all sites in Umgeni Water. Apart from working at Umgeni Water, Sakili is keen to see the youth succeed. That's all close to our heart, and well done. He volunteered to help the young identify the career choices while they were at high school level. He has been a member of the BCB. I have to ask Chen what it was, please. Kindly written it down for me. Chen has been a member of the Bergville Community Builder Program and has served on the board of directors for 7 years, including being chairperson for 1 year. He has been on the board for Mountain Muse since 2014, and has been the chairperson for more than 4 years. And with any further ado, Sakili, who is our engineer and knows a hell of a lot more about the details than we do. We're journalists, I'm afraid. Well, I'm not afraid. I'm actually proud to be a journalist and not to be a specialist, but there we go. Only to a specialist. There we go.
Thanks, Edward. Just a correction, I'm not an engineer, I'm a scientist.
Oh, sorry.
I know engineers would be called being introduced as an engineer. I think I'm privileged to be with well-seasoned and traveled panelists with a lot of experience in their field. So for me, I'm not going to apply to presentation. I'm going to have a discussion in terms of water conservation. Because this series is climate change and resilience, I've just chosen to talk about water losses. Mainly because it's in Devon we are losing about 5% of the water that we're receiving. So it's non-revenue water, so there is a lot of losses in terms of water. And for our water conservation, we can start there by starting to reduce all these losses. The climate change is actually defined as the shift in temperatures and weather patterns and therefore changing the seasons. So our weather pattern is no longer the same. I prefer to say for me it's changing seasons and it's not allowing us now to be able to plan like we used to before. So we need to develop new techniques and we need to develop a new management techniques in order for us to ensure that we manage our water resources effectively. So talking about increase in temperatures, it leads us to have a lot of frequencies, the increase in frequencies in droughts and flood scenarios or situations, which actually disturb our water supply infrastructure, which is a bigger problem. So for us, I'll just go to show how these two impact in terms of our water supply and water losses. During the floods, first we've got a lot of water. We've got a poor water quality, infrastructure damage, and a lot of loss of life. So we need to develop a quick response to the floods in a very short period of time, which is becoming a problem because now you've got a situation where you need to respond quicker as compared to the drought. And the drought, you have a lot less water. Poor water quality is still there, but you've got prolonged loss of life, which may be actually managed. So you have a prolonged time to solve the situation. Looking at the floods, you've got a lot of damage in terms of infrastructure, and you need to decide in terms of how you fix it. That is, you maintain it. You've got a short time, you need a lot of revenue to actually fix your infrastructure. And while that is happening, you don't have the water supply or you've got a lot of water losses. You need to ensure that you make decision. Your decision is either you make it on a monetary value to say whether we've got money to do this, but you still have a legal obligation to ensure that the water is served to communities. So in terms of that, you still have to look at all of the role players. You look at the role players in terms of fixing the infrastructure. When I'm there, I'll have to now go to all the role players in terms of water resource management and supply. You've got role players, you've got water regulator, which is DWS, you've got water ports. Currently, you've got together, and then you've got municipality, and you've got communities. So you need to look at this holistically because this problem needs to be solved by every role player. It can't be solved by one stakeholder. You've got the regulator is just actually a watchdog for me to ensure everything is being done properly. You've got your water boards with the bulk infrastructure, your dams, your aqueduct, big infrastructure to transport water resource from the dams to municipal, or from the dams to the to the water treatment plants, and then from there to the municipality tanks. You've got, in fact, you don't need to be worried a lot about the water boards because in terms of the financial muscle, if I may say, they do have, usually they are able to manage to fix the infrastructure and then they will be maybe quicker in terms of that. And then you've got your municipality. And the municipality is taking water from their reservoirs to the communities, and that is a huge infrastructure, which will include urban areas, townships, and in some cases, rural areas. So in terms of the financial muscle, for me, it's questionable. And it's where we need to actually invest time to say, are we prepared to sort out this infrastructure when we have floods? Are we able to ensure that we're fixing this infrastructure quickly? And then you also have communities. Then the communities, in fact, you can talk about the architecture of the house. The community is gonna have to fix their infrastructure in houses, their toilets, if there is, their showers and so on. And also once the pipeline is inside there, then they need to be able to fix that. But most importantly is that all this land revenue, that 55%, it's actually being lost between the community and municipality. To say, if you see the leak, is there anyone who's reporting the leak? Is there anyone who's fixing it? If the bathroom is not working properly, is there anyone who's fixing it? And so on. So we're looking at that and trying to ensure that we can communicate as communities, communicate to municipalities, and municipalities take it up further so that it can be sorted. So if we're not having a financial or the investment that can help to actually fix the infrastructure, then we are in trouble in terms of that. Also, I will touch on the rainwater harvesting. I know the panelists spoke about it, and there is a suggestion that the airport can actually store up to 7.5 million cubic meters of water. In fact, that's a huge amount of water. I think the water boards, the water regulators need to look at that. I think for me, that amount of water is actually bigger than Mzindo, and it is we actually supply the Mzindo town. So if we can have that amount of water, I don't see why we can't look at that. The important things though is to understand whether there is an investment to do that, to build that storage, because connecting into the lines in the north coast, the reticulation lines are existing. So we need the storage to say, okay, we can build the storage of this amount of water, and then start to take it to relieve the upstream or the inland water resource. So the inland water resource can supply the inland. And then whatever is being achieved in the coastal can be used to supply the coastal.
One thing, Sakili, I don't know is how much water does the airport actually use for things like toilets and washing the apron and washing the aircraft. So that's something I haven't been able to find out.
Yeah.
But yeah, your use has got to be set against the amount that you can actually collect and store. But that 7.5 million is per year.
Yes.
Given a decent rainy season. Okay, depends on the rainy season.
Yes. In fact, I wanted to touch on that as well. To say South Africa is being taunted as the water scarce country, with the average of about 680 millimeters of rainfall per year. And the figures that we have here for the coastal, with the dry season of 975, and it's far above average, and during the dry season, and 1,135 millimeters during the I would say the flooding seasons or El Nino or La Nino period. Those two figures are far above our average. That's why I wanted to touch on this, because we need to be careful when we planning in terms of rainwater harvesting, and to be able to ensure that we are actually we're covering a urban rural and township, because you get a different figures if you're going inland in terms of the rainfall, and when you go into township in terms of the rainfall. And also the architecture is not going to allow you to be able to get this amount of water, or to channel this amount of water to storage based on the architecture, the landscaping and so on. So I think these discussions it's really opening the eyes, and it's making us think differently in terms of how we can approach the water conservation and the climate change as well. I want to also touch on the ugly things. In fact, I've been touching on those ugly things, floods and droughts, which is it brings the bad in terms of water resource, and also to touch on the use of grey water in terms of ensuring that we can use, if we want to conserve more water or save water, we can use the grey water as the panelists said, for gardening, flushing, irrigating, and washing the cars. So we still need to have maybe to educate one another in terms of how we can save water, to ensure that the supply is not interrupted in terms of, and also to be able to cover the future demands of the country. Yes, I think I will stop.
Thank you. Thanks, Akini. This series, incidentally, one thing we didn't mention it, but just for those who don't know, the series which will be conducted on basically on a monthly basis. Well, this one is obviously water conservation and use. Electricity and energy efficiency follows. Then a session on nature, just simply titled Nature, so that's a very broad, open subject. The fourth session will be financial, economic benefits, and sustainable design. The final session, which I think will probably only happen in February or March next year, is timeless architectural design. So keep those ones in mind. And the idea is, in fact, to encourage communication. Now, I'm sorry, we've been talking flat out for a long time. I think really what we should do is open the floor up to any queries or questions. I don't know whether there's anything online at all that needs to be, but anybody want to ask a specific question? Or, Velosha, you want to take it?
Yeah, I think we'll open it.
Is it not working?
I don't know. No.
Oh, okay.
You guys have been talking to one of
Just speak loudly then.
Yeah.
I think we can hear you fine.
Yeah. But I don't know whether it's going over on the airwaves.
Okay. But I think they can hear online.
Can they? Is this microphone picking it up?
No.
We can hear you fine.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Thanks, Philo. Hi, everybody. Thank you for your input. Not so much a question specific to what was discussed, but I think between one of the comments from yourself, Chen, and Sakila, you started talking about community spaces and environments. I think just talking to the reality and not wanting to romanticize rural environments and engagements with the environment in a way that we do not cultivate within urban environments. We can talk about that very realistically. But I think that we can't deny or avoid the necessity of the trouble of service delivery and the assumption that powers that be or municipalities deliver these services that are sorry. That wasn't necessary. Deliver these services to us, and in a way it does create a screen or a screen that separates us from our environment. It creates a screen that separates us from understanding the systems that are required to conserve water, to filter water, for our relationship with it. So, you just switch on the tap and this magical thing appears, which is why it can roll on and on, and we can use it for all sorts of things unnecessarily. But maybe just your reflections on understanding perhaps how we could mitigate this this, and I know it's very difficult from the perspective of the architect. And so, Sakile, maybe from your science background, how do we engage in these conversations to overcome the green screen that exists between ourselves, particularly in urban environments, and our clients, or ourselves and community-based clients on topics such as water conservation? To anybody, thanks.
No, you can start.
You want me to? Oh, crumbs. Adima, thank you. Yeah, look, one thing that hasn't been mentioned in this whole exercise is, in fact, population increase and semigration that we have. Now, a city like Durban is projected to grow exponentially over the next 5 to 10 years. And that's something as well that has to be considered. But maybe, I don't know, maybe we should be learning about storing water in smaller containers more frequently and closer together to feed communities. One thing that I will get back to is this deeply entrenched idea of limitlessness. We think that water is unlimited. It's not. Same thing goes for power generation, obviously, and all sorts of resources. But we have to get over this whole problem of thinking that water is a never-ending resource. And this is where education is vitally important, because the biggest, I believe that the established urban population has the potential, has the ability to consider this and actually to do something personally about it. But we have vast numbers of people who just don't have the resources, just can't do it. How are we going to help them? How are we going to assist them in the process of getting clean water? Now, one of the problems we have, of course, with informal settlements is that they will naturally go for unused land, wasteland, and very often close to a stream of some kind, because after all, water is what we all need. We have to get water from somewhere, somehow. And if we can't get clean, potable water from the municipality, okay, we'll use the stream. But we've got to really consider how we allow this, or how we encourage it, or how we can, I suppose, can benefit from the whole process. But yes, I think, well, Adima, what your finger is sort of pointing at is not just what registered traditional architects can do. And of course, they can do a huge amount together with their clients. But we have, I don't know, something vast, like possibly well over 70% of the population that need to be assisted in this whole process. And how can architects and engineers, for that matter, and scientists get involved in that whole process? That's something I think that we need to think about. We need to, in fact, maybe come up with ideas. But my first thought is we should be collecting rainwater at more frequent intervals in order that they become distributed either on a community basis or on a neighborhood basis. Anyway, there we go. What do you think?
Yeah, thanks. I think this is an important question. I think the problem that we have is it's planning. That's the first thing. And also, you go to rural areas, you don't find any planning there. People are being distributed in a manner that you cannot say there's someone who planned how, if you want to put the resource here, you can use. And township, it's a space. You can see most of the houses are close together, while in the rural areas, the houses are further apart. So I think my idea would be to first, when a rural area is being developed, to try and use the correct architecture so that they can be able to collect water, which is difficult as we speak now, because that the plots are already there. I can look at the areas where the government is moving people from a classic example from the shacks to a planned area where they building the areas for people and then taking them to that area and then start to phase out the unplanned clusters, if I may say. I can think of that as the initial one to say, okay, let's phase out all these areas where we cannot be able to supply water. Also in the rural areas, I think rural areas will be easy because you've got fewer families than in townships. You will have a lot of space if you are planning a area for them. You can have a lot of space that will be available if you move them, if they agree to be moved to that area, because that's another issue. Because as we stand, there are challenges. I've seen some rural areas where there is there are water treatment plants. They've built water treatment plants. They've built pipelines, but you can see that those pipelines need to travel along a lot of area to reach those areas. So it doesn't make an economical sense to do that. So yeah, I think we need to think of different solution, maybe to try and ensure that people who can be able to move to where their resources are, can be moved to those areas.
Thank you. I think we have a question from Ivor online. Ivor, you can go for it.
Hi. I want to just point out, and taking to Dima's point very clearly, is that also what we're talking about as architects and climate change is dealing with the urban planning issues, particularly where we've got informal housing occurring. How do we actually try and utilize a number of buildings to collect water and also deal with runoff of water so that it in fact doesn't pollute the natural water systems? And I think that holistically, we've been talking very briefly in the context of general terms about water conservation. But, in a single house is one thing. But when you are dealing with it as a climate change issue, we have to deal with it on an urban design process. And in terms of that, the idea of not having individual houses, but how we're looking at group housing and how these sort of things all need to be incorporated in the design and the urban plan of issues around collection of water and then the treatment of that water in maybe in micro systems rather than in fact trying to deal with it on a holistic macro system. I'd just like your views on that.
I'm just thinking out the box, and I look around the room here, and there's a lot of experienced people, and Ava yourself too. I mean, a lot of the new future urban plannings that the country should be getting hold of super experienced architects of national importance and understanding that would make big differences. I mean, if you got involved with a huge big housing scheme south of Durban, or where the new airport possibly is, where the new harbour is going and how they handle it, I really believe there's so much talented, experienced people underutilized in the field that they are. And they would make a huge difference in the field, just what you've highlighted, because we could be not looking just at the one-off house thing like I spoke about, but looking at an urban context. And I think maybe that's where the opportunity lies. Future changes and future planning to incorporate all conservation so that it's as efficient as you could ever be, and crossing some of those bridges that you might be talking about, bringing in all those green aspects and bridging that line between what isn't happening and what could be happening. I often used to look around and look at those rows and rows and rows of straight, and it felt it's like an engineer's just done it that way, and it was the way to do it. So, there's a million different new ways to do things, and I think there's a lot of talent in this country ready to be sown into the bigger macro infrastructure planning to get over these hurdles that we're going to be facing in the future. And I think that's my take on it.
Yeah. Thanks, Ivo, for that comment. If you are referring to stormwater, I believe we have a space where we can collect a stormwater and treat it and then use it as grey water to ensure that we minimize the use of purified water for things like gardening, washing cars, and so on. Thanks.
Thanks, Akili. Yeah, Ivo, you're quite right. But, to be quite frank and to be quite blunt about it, we are in fact at least two different countries. And we've got many different solutions, but we've got two basic solutions. One is using the professionals, as Chen has just mentioned, and that is really under the control of architects, engineers, quantity surveyors, and conscientious developers, clients. The thing that concerns me is the private or informal part of our community, which is vast. Now, I think we also got to think about incentives. I would like to be paid for the tanks that I put in. How about a municipality? But you're going to actually benefit me in some way. You're going to give me something back. The same thing, of course, goes for electricity, and we've all been talking about that for some time. But there has to be incentives for people to do things and for people to save. And I mean, with the number of individual houses that have been built in Belito over the last even 3 years, is phenomenal amount of investment. The private investment is at least 4 times bigger than the business investment in the area when you add the money together. It's astonishing. And therefore, those people can be and should be encouraged to do more to save the water, so that the potable water, can go to people who need to drink and wash. Okay, so we can save. We can save by developing our own collection, reticulation, and storage systems on a vast scale. But incentives are always necessary at the end of the day. Human beings are such that they won't do anything unless they have an incentive. So that's one of the things. But yes, in terms of our vast, poorer or informal communities, we really got to take care that they are not only protected, but encouraged to consider hygienic and sensible ways of developing and living. The subject is very close to my heart, is in fact self-build, self-help, guided self-build. And I think it's an aspect that's hardly been tapped in this country. It needs to be tapped. We have to learn lessons from the likes of India. And again, you can't really encourage people to develop systems like they do in every village in India. You travel through India and every single dwelling has got its own pipe collection and tank. They collect water. We're talking about rural people, simply because they have learned that there is no such thing as limitless supply. Supply is, I'm afraid, finite. And this business of unlimited supply, we just have to get over it and encourage people to save, protect, look after themselves. Anyway, that's my view. I'm old-fashioned.
Ken, can I just say that? Can I carry on?
Education.
Ivan?
Yeah, Ken, you've touched on the issue I wanted to ask the team's response, and you actually said in India there are collections of people who are collecting and maintaining and controlling their water. And I asked Chen, I mean, he knows, and I know we looking at a development in the SAIA precinct. With all the floods we've had and things like that, there are housing developments going up there, but there's really no requirement to actually store water and to reuse it as a development in a prime area of Durban, which we in fact are seeing very little consideration of the water usage for various issues. And if you just take the flushing of toilets, I think a statistic I've seen is something like 30% of the water used in a house is actually used in flushing it down the drain again. So, really, it's something which we as architects should be driving. And we're talking about not educating other people, but educating ourselves and trying to influence the authorities accordingly. Thanks.
Thanks, Alva. Any other questions from the floor?
Sure, sorry. I just wanted to say, and I did see something come up, that I think that the idea of incentive is, in my opinion, and everybody who knows me, forgive me for my language, but is a bit of a cop-out. We're just simply feeding back into the neoliberalist capitalist system that got us into this position in the first place. And so rather, why are we not looking at, and again, I said earlier, let's not romanticize systems of the past and of rural environments, but why are we not looking at methodologies around defining understandings around the commons? And so the reference to India is fantastic, because there is an establishment and understanding of the way in which we exist as human beings as purveyors of this land, not to extract from it. And so I think this idea of incentive for doing something good, if we're looking for an incentive, I think maybe the incentive could be, let's not burn the world and kill us off faster than we are already. Is that not enough of an incentive? I don't know. Sorry, just had to say.
Good day, everyone. My name is Tino, and something came in mind when you guys were presenting, and I was looking at Ken's wife graph and record keeping of all those numbers of how much water they collect, over the months and over the years and stuff like that. I was trying to find a trend to see that over the years, have we started getting more rain? Has something started to change? That's what this is about. It's about the climate change and about how our environment is changing and how it's becoming more and more unpredictable in a sense. I wanted to ask, what can we do as architects? Because it's becoming more and more unpredictable how to plan. If you don't have the relevant data to say that if you plan for an environment that's going to have a trend of more and more droughts over the years, and you plan to say that there's going to be more rainfall and it doesn't come, what can we do? Are there tools, are there relevant data that comes up that we can use to then plan ahead for these water conservation strategies and to be more resilient as time goes on?
Do you want to answer that? Because I want to say something that's kind of aligned. This series is called Climate Change and Resilience. And are you referring to architecture or communities? Because I think it's about the communities and people building on flat land near streams is not good at all, because those are floodplains. So I think we really, really need to focus far more on communities. Architecture is the lesser.
Maybe sort of answering your question or not answering. I got linked to someone by mistake, a family, and they run a little childcare center in Nanda, and their home is like a headquarters in this whole community. When I first met them, they only had sand in the roads, and later, 6 years later, they paved the roads and tarred the roads, and they hired the community. But I watched the whole growth of the area and how we got involved. We helped get people aware, and we built them a bigger, because basically this lady and her husband look after the moms that work in all the suburbs, little babies. And the moms get up so early that they can't even drop the babies off, but because they go so early, but the kids on the way to school do. But I've been involved with it for 15 plus years, and I've got involved in a small pinprick of a way, but changing a whole lot of things. They've got a river down below. We've got them planting, herb spinach, and it's such unbelievably dark soil. It's just, and it's near the Nanda Dam, but not that. It's like maybe 3 k's away on the way. You come from the Kwama Shoe side, and they've got a name for their thing, and it's been painted, and they've got new buildings, and we tap the water off, and we were teaching them to be sustainable, and they grow vegetables, chilies and spinach, and they live off the land completely, and they weren't before. So I've got to know the couple super well. Their daughter since now graduated in engineering. She was a young girl before. We've basically, on my own with a few friends of mine and my wife and stuff, we've got involved and sort of equipped their place, and their house is not. It's a community centre. It isn't really, but it is, because they've been lifted up. And I think, so what I was getting around to thinking, all the questions, it's, we live on the other side of the hill where you have so much. And when you get there, you get to realize the realities of life, which is the biggest volume of this country. And I think, Trish, maybe that's what you so it changed my life a lot. In fact, emotionally, I saw things that I saw radical things in the fire department. I visited places and mortuaries and things people wouldn't know about and wouldn't even ever want to know about. There I saw even radical things, but it really made me more understanding. That's why what I said, what you read out, I just think that there's so many talented people that should be more involved in the volume of people of this country, but we excluded and we cut off from it. And it's just, I tried to get through. I designed a brick that could be done by people with sand in it. The single brick skin that they're building the houses is a problem, because when you chase it, it leaks. So we designed a machine and patented it that you drop sand and cement mixed in the bricks. So they're like Legos. So there are different modules, a 48 module, of 62. So as they get more money, they can build on and on and on. And we just got doors closed bigger. We eventually got to Tokyo, and the lady told me, Chen, shall I say it to you as it is? And she told me as it is. So I backed off and went. And we paid for machines. So we carried on with the people we are involved with and doing what we can do, because you can only do what we can do. But I think there's so many people from our territory that have got lots of great education. We've had a chance to change some people's lives. A young daughter, she's a young engineer now. Just seeing what's happened in 15 years has been probably more rewarding than half the other homes I've done. I'm not knocking the people that have done all these things, but there I saw life, and I saw the volume of life, the reality of life. In fact, the truth of what's really going on in this place, which it never gets, we skip over it, and we don't ever go there. So I kind of think I was listening to what you're saying, but I'm not sure if I'm answering it. And Trish, kind of thinking what you said, and I'm trying to tell you what we just had a chance to do, and what an effect it's had on me, Anyway.
Yeah. Thanks. Probably I'll cover the 3 comments. With the first one to say people shouldn't be building in the low-lying areas or in a floodplains. Definitely people should not do that, but the problem is social ills, which is out of our control. But getting back to climate change resilience, I think we need to adapt. There are 2 things when you want to be resilient. It's either you adapt to what is happening or you avoid what is happening. The first one, which came from the first question, is why don't we reduce our emission? That's the other thing that we need to be resilient about, to try and reduce our emissions so that we avoid climate change. And the other one is to look at the patterns that are caused by climate change, and then we start to adapt to it. One of the things to identify when the flood is going to happen and be able to notice it early and identify the possible flooding areas, and ensuring that we can save lives. So that is one other thing that we can do. There are quite a lot, but I'll mention these two for now to say, why don't we try to avoid it or try to adapt? That's
Okay, thanks, Igili. Young man, sorry, I didn't get your name. You asked the question. Tino, thanks. Yeah, look, we are fortunate in South Africa to have a very good weather bureau. They have very good stats. Look them up as well, okay? But as by way of explanation, we have this huge, rather amorphous, frightening thing called climate change. And climate change is happening on an increasing basis. I think we know that. Human beings, I'm afraid, haven't really learnt the lessons. There's all sorts of conferences, all sorts of talks, all sorts of commitments, and nothing's done. So we've got to do it. And it starts with us. It starts with you and me. Okay, that's where it's got to start. At the end of the day, just by way of explanation, we've had an international weather effect called La Niña, which is the flow of air in a cyclical pattern around the equator along the Pacific and into the Indian Ocean. Now, La Niña blows it towards us. We have more precipitation, or more chance of precipitation, and obviously rainfall. El Niño, I beg your pardon, let me get it right. El Niño is coming, where the cycle is reversed and effectively blowing the rain away from us. And it's reckoned that that's going to affect Southern Africa for at least the next 3 years. So it's something that we've been warned about. The weather boffins, the weather scientists, have in fact warned us about it. And it's a matter of what we can do about it. Hopefully that helps you a bit, but the idea, please don't forget there are stats out there, and the Weather Bureau here is very good, excellent in South Africa. Trish, your query? Yes, sure, you're quite right. These aspects are bigger than just us. However, we are architects. We design buildings. We deal with other professionals. We deal with engineers, QSs, town planners sometimes. And we need to do that. And in fact, once again, I will try and encourage this institute to be more outgoing and in fact involve the other institutes much more than we do at the moment. We need to be more broadly based, broadly thinking in terms of these problems. You're quite right. They're not just specifically architectural. They are in fact much broader and relate to the community at large, clearly. And I think though, architects being generalists, being people trained to think broadly, to think out of the box, we're in a good position to be able to lead the discussion. And we've just got to keep promoting it, keep pushing it, and make sure that we get the word out there. I would love to think that this institute could and should get involved maybe with the television media and actually maybe start thinking about 1 or 2 programs related to our list of topics that we're talking about. But that's maybe something for the middle distant future. We need to get the word beyond our own limits. We are far too introverted, and I'll use a horrible word, incestuous a profession, because we deal with ourselves and we're dealing with engineers for a specific project for a relatively short space of time. Okay, you've designed the structure, cheerio. We're not really talking about the bigger issues. And I think we need to do that. We need to establish a forum. And this is a wonderful starting point. And my congratulations to Nikiwe, who's not here. I understand that Nikiwe's just got married. And congratulations to Nikiwe. And of course, RegCom. And thank you to RegCom and to President Skura for initiating this whole thing. It's the more discussion there is, the more chance we have of actually getting our teeth into the problems. But I do believe that every single architect in this town, in this province, has the ability to influence clients into thinking about climate change and what we should be doing. And that's a start. We need to walk before we can obviously run around the block. So, yes, we need to broaden our thinking to cover the community. And there are vast numbers of people who can't help themselves. They're in a terrible position. And we really have a responsibility and a social duty to help them. But how do we get involved in that process? That's another question that we have to ask ourselves. How do we take that step? We've got our own very well controlled, rather limited in some ways, profession. And there's this great divide between the profession, the private profession, and the public sector. We've got to try and break that barrier down somehow. Anyway, I've said enough. Thanks.
Thanks, Ken. I think we have a question from Victor online. Victor,
good question for Ken. Good to see that you're well. Hats off for the effort that you've gone in respect of your private project in storing water. I wanted to ask you is, in terms of incentives, have you actually looked at the payback, if you like? How much is a cubic meter of water? How much did it cost you to build the tanks? And, you know, what do you get out of it in practical terms?
Not a huge amount. Sorry. Victor, hi, nice to see you, and thanks for the query. To be quite frank, not a huge amount, because we have to, we get a basic supply. I think it's 10, what they call 10 units in the Belita area. We try and save on that. And in fact, we never ever use more than about 6. So I suppose we are saving ourselves some money, but to be quite frank, we haven't quantified it. I suppose we need to. All we do is just make sure we keep our veggies going, our garden going, and we're able to wash the 3 cars on a sort of twice a week. But at the end of the day, yes, you have to be able to quantify it, especially with clients. Obviously, you have to be able to convince them that it's a sensible way to go. But I really would like to see that officialdom understands and appreciates and applauds the individual efforts of architects and clients to actually take care of themselves and save water, in this case, or power, or whatever it happens to be, for those in the community that can't deal with themselves. Anyway, thanks. That's what I've got to say. Anybody else to add?
Yeah. Thanks, Victor, for that question. I'll just comment on, every time when you're building something and you're moving away from being supplied, you always spend a lot of money as a capital and you get your incentive at a later stage. I'm not sure if it has looked at that. That's
Here's the benefits, you're right.
Thank you. Any other questions? I know we have a lot of questions in the chat, but I think we're going to actually encourage our people online to email those queries through, because a lot of it has to do with calculations.
I suggest that when anybody's got queries, they can actually write them in, send them into the office, admin at whatever it is, .org. And I'm sure
I think there's a lot of technical questions there. So, I think if they can send it to the office, we'll pass it on to you. So, So I'd like to thank our panelists again for taking part and, encouraging this very important dialogue which we needed to have. And this is going to spark, a series in the new year, which we're going to continue then, which is very important to us on climate change and resilience. So thank you again. I think we can just give you a round of applause.
What cigarettes? I haven't smoked a cigarette for 30 years, but anyway, thank you.
And again, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Safal Steel, for sponsoring the event. And thank you to our online presence. I see we've got a big number. I encourage you again to join us for our next session, which will be in the new year, which will deal with the energy crisis and electricity, which I think will be quite informative for everyone. So thank you, everyone, and thanks for joining us online.
Well, can we add our thanks to Chris and Sapphire?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
And,
Thanks.
well done.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.
Okay, is that it? Yeah, on the dot. You didn't tell them what they were missing out on. Oh, goodness. Yeah. Thanks for watching.
Yeah.
Well, there we go. It's an interesting one. That's fine. It's an interesting problem.